All right, welcome everyone to another video from your friends here at Altitude University. Today we have a interview scheduled with Kelly Brodbeck, who is the product manager for the Cyrus project over at Teledyne FLIR. Welcome, Kelly. We're glad to have you.
Thanks. It's great to be here.
Terrific. Before we begin, we just want to remind everybody to go ahead and hit those like and subscribe buttons so that we can continue to provide you more drone-related content. All right, so Kelly, if you could start, just kind of tell us a little about yourself and how you got involved with this project.
Oh, well, I think I created it is how I got involved with it. I'm a veteran of a number of technical industries, and when people look at my resume, it's like, how does any of this go together? But the common theme is taking technologies, figuring out how to build products around them, and then commercializing those products. So a few years ago, when I came to Teledyne FLIR, I was put in charge of our UAS program, which was largely a payload program. We made thermal cameras that were gimbalized, for the most part, sold them to DJI, but a few others as well. And as sort of the leader of that program, I saw it ultimately coming to an end with shifts in the market, shifts in international relationships, et cetera, and decided we really need to have our own drone if this business within Teledyne FLIR is going to continue. Now, Teledyne FLIR is a big company. We make all kinds of drones. We have since the 1960s, actually. So what Cyrus is a drone for the commercial market. Law enforcement, public safety, people doing inspections of buildings and bridges, and utility assets, et cetera. So that was the segment that we were selling our payloads into. And as I said, I decided that we needed to have our own drone in order to have a continuing presence in that market. So that was the origin of Cyrus. From there, it was, okay, do we make our own drone? Do we design this? Are we a drone company, or do we partner with somebody? And so we took the partnership route.
Yeah, and I think that would bring a lot of challenges with it, going from, like obviously, like you said, your cameras are on a lot of different payloads, throughout the commercial drone industry, particularly on a lot of the DJI platforms and whatnot, but, really across the board. What challenges did you have to come up with, the entire drone and not just focusing on the payload?
Yeah, well, it's about finding the right partner. So we got into term sheet negotiations with a few companies, lots of due diligence. I was very focused on making sure that this drone came in at less than $10,000. I think that's an important price point, particularly for a lot of law enforcement agencies, who is the principal customer for this. So who can make a drone that doesn't have the issues with Chinese manufacturing, has the right level of quality, can hit the price targets. So it was really a global search. And we selected Coretronics out of Taiwan to be our drone partner. So they're the manufacturer and supplier to us of the drone. We've been very involved with them and their engineering team in taking a drone that they designed for the Taipei Police Department and modifying it for the US market. And that's an ongoing process, actually. So it's our engineers working with theirs, largely on the flight control system. The hardware is, we've been less involved with that, a little bit, but it's mostly working on the flight control system, understanding how users in the United States, particularly law enforcement and their unique situations, how that has to drive certain features of the controller, the user interface, and the performance of the drone.
What are some of those features that you find were key, towards targeting that market?
Yeah, well, first of all, Cyrus, it stands for Secure Infrared Aerial System. So secure means not connected to the internet, data security. We talk a lot about, is China spying on the United States using the drones that they've supplied to the United States? In law enforcement, it gets into things like chain of custody and making sure that the evidence that you've collected is tamper-proof. So not connecting to the internet, having all the data from a scene that law enforcement is observing and recording, having all that pure and in the hands of the law enforcement via the drone itself is super important to them. The thermal camera is also super important. The resolution on Cyrus really blows people away. The imagery that they get for the price of the drone is just amazing to people. And I think that's why a lot of law enforcement departments have been buying it. And the fact that it's not made with significant parts from China. The batteries come from China, but nothing smart that transmits data where your data could be compromised. That's another important feature to law enforcement and others as well.
Did you have any like real world examples you could share with us from when you first started introducing it to the U.S. market, where users in the law enforcement or other areas really gave positive feedback about what they were seeing?
We get it every day. There are certain counties, sheriff offices in Florida, especially. Some of them, the biggest one has 35 Cyrus units in active use
Wow.
every day. They've flown thousands of missions. The number of fugitives that have been captured are now in the hundreds. I get stories every day of, yeah, last night we were chasing a fugitive through the swamp, and we got the guy. It would be really nice if, the radar had further distance so we could fly more aggressively at night. It usually comes in the form of product suggestions.
Mhm.
Uh, but there's no shortage of stories of just daily use by law enforcement. We've had a lot of challenges in Florida with the temperature last summer
Mhm.
and the batteries. I think batteries are always a challenge for all drones. So flying when it's hot can really put stress on the batteries and shorten their life. So I deal with a lot of battery issues, and through those interactions, learn a lot of stories of how they use Cyrus every day and how they have to keep it flying because it's the drone that they now are using and focused on.
Are there any like obviously very useful in fugitive apprehension? Have you had any things like search and rescue where law enforcement has been able to use the drone successfully?
For sure. Yeah. When I say thousands of missions, many of those are search and rescue. Also, a certain amount of surveillance before and after natural disasters.
Mm.
We see departments when they know a hurricane is coming in, they'll get the drones up, they'll go fly over areas and just record what it looks like,
Mm.
structures that they think are going to be um, threatened, like a mobile home park. They really want to have a good understanding of what things look like as the storm is coming in. Then, after the storm, if damage did occur, they fly again. And with the reference of their first video, they can say, okay, there used to be a trailer there. Now it isn't. Who lived there? Etc. We see people in the refinery business doing the same thing for insurance reasons before and after natural disasters with their tanks and their tank farms, proving that the tanks were there, they were numbered correctly. Here's what it looked like, and then they, of course, have after videos to show as well. So yeah, we get all sorts of uses, not all of which were anticipated. So it's interesting to watch how people use it.
Yeah, I loved having the opportunity to fly it for a couple weeks. I loved the different features on it. In particular the zoom and the thermal camera. With the I believe it's 128x zoom. I could see where in my previous work in search and rescue for various teams throughout the country, having that ability to zoom out to 128x is pretty useful.
Yeah, there was one story that was really cool. Again, it was law enforcement in Florida, and they were chasing someone through. It was at night. Burglar was trying to get into a strip mall, ran behind the buildings into a wooded area that also had a lot of water in it, and they lost them in the trees. And they were following him with a thermal camera, and they lost him. But then they found his footprints with the thermal camera. He had gone through water ran up an embankment and they could see the footprints and the general direction they were going, and figured out where he was headed. So they stationed units at the edge of the woods on the other side, and sure enough, he showed up. So they credited the thermal camera for that.
Yeah, it's pretty impressive. What other unique features? Like I know there's the MSX technology. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, it's there. It's mostly intended for inspectors. And we had it in the drone. And then we made we're making a lot of firmware changes all the time. So we decided we didn't like the MSX that we initially put out there. So the current firmware that's out there doesn't have MSX. But it'll be coming back in February. And not only will it be a still picture MSX, but now we'll be adding the live video MSX.
Oh, that's
Um, where inspectors find that particularly helpful if they're, say, looking at assets that have numbers on them, a tank or a utility asset, and they want to take thermal pictures. Generally, the markings don't show up in a thermal picture. So what MSX does, it takes a visible picture and a thermal and it overlays the two. So things like tank markings or numbers that might be on a utility pole where you have some transformers glowing, you can retain the markings on the thermal picture, so you don't have to take so many pictures and they're easy to track after you get back to the office and you're doing your report.
Yeah, I know from the slides that I saw, it was very interesting. Yeah,
Yeah.
I liked the usefulness, especially for presenting to people after a flight. More information than you could get just from the thermal imagery.
Yeah, and with our latest firmware update, we now have compatibility between Cyrus and FLIR Thermal Studio, which is the data tracking or data management and report writing software that we make available. Previously, it only worked with FLIR Tools, which is older software, but our latest great software, FLIR Thermal Studio and Cyrus, will now talk to each other. So, every month we add new features to it. And you said that you had flown a few weeks ago. I encourage you to get another one or update the firmware. I think it's the firmware version 75 is what we call it. People are really excited about that, particularly the responsiveness of the drone to the stick commands and all the features we've put in, like exponential control over the sticks. Just things that people expect that they said, hey, we want this, so we go to work and put it out there. So yeah, if you haven't flown Cyrus in a while, the latest is really quite different.
I'll definitely have to check it out. With those updates that you're putting out, in the firmware, I'm assuming that also is helping the platform keep current with regulations like remote ID, for example.
Sure. So firmware 65, and we don't release all of these firmwares, right? So our firmware releases, I think we've had 4. So we call them 49, 59, 65, and 75. All the numbers in between are our internal evaluations and whatnot. But yes, remote ID 65, which is in September, makes Cyrus completely compliant. When you get your Cyrus, you have to enter the serial number of your drone into the controller, so the serial number can be broadcast. Other than that, it's a behind-the-scenes system that you just don't even know is there. But Cyrus is fully compliant. And then with regard to state laws, federal rules for federal departments like the Department of Interior, with restrictions on components that are manufactured in the People's Republic of China, Cyrus is compliant with all of that as well. We provide documentation from our supplier and from us to people that are wanting to look into all that for cybersecurity purposes.
So I assume with that, there's probably some limitations on it outside of the US, like ITAR or things like that, where it can't be used everywhere.
We do have plans to make a version of Cyrus for Europe. The regulations there are quite different.
Mm,
So in the United States, Cyrus is a no geofencing, remote ID compliant drone. In Europe, they want geo awareness, if not geofencing. They have their version of remote ID, a lot more rules. So the SKU of Cyrus that will ultimately be sold in Europe would be quite different from what you'd see in the United States.
I see.
In the United States, we try and give the pilots as much control over the drone and the applications as possible, because law enforcement is our number one focus in public safety. They have to have more freedom to be able to do what they need to do, like fly at night, fly without geofencing, etc. Hot swappable batteries, super important to them. Um, so it's really we're designing it for them and the inspection industry as well.
Yeah, it definitely seemed from what I found flying it that it was geared more towards giving the responsibilities to the pilot more than automating it with, I know other drones that I've flown have, especially in the area where I operate, the geofencing becomes a problem in a lot of cases, where you have the permission and it's not letting you access. But I really liked how the Cyrus drone, that was on you. You were responsible 100% for making sure that you were flying in a, safe space.
Right. And rapid deployment is important to
Mhm.
our customers. So geofencing tends to get in the way of that. With regard to autonomous flight, that's a big thing. It's expensive,
Mhm.
frankly. And, one of the key selling points of Cyrus is that it is less than $10,000. So when you start to layer on technologies, at a certain point, you have to wonder, well, okay, it's cool, but is it worth paying more for it?
Mhm.
Let's just go get good pilots that aren't going to run into stuff and save $10,000 a drone. So we've really taken a lean sort of approach to the design of Cyrus and put the emphasis on pilots to know what they're doing and fly well. I'll have to say, of the many hundreds of units that are out there, more than 500, to date. Um, I think we've had four come back with pilot air. I mean, it's a fairly rare circumstance that someone will fly it into a tree or
Mhm.
whatever. So,
Yeah, that's pretty good with that many units out there, especially given the amount of missions you're saying, everybody's flying out there, on a given day.
yeah, so it's like I say, it's more than 500 units, but they're all being flown multiple times per day. So it's a lot of use out of what's right now is a fairly small fleet. And our plan for 2024, of course, is to scale the fleet.
So with scaling and also combining a lean approach to the design of Cyrus, what do you see for the future of the platform? Like, are you looking at expanding capabilities, but without, breaking that cost barrier, or are you looking at future platforms like different, iterations of Cyrus or other drones?
I I really don't want to have multiple iterations of it. The idea is that this is a platform that we will hang various payloads on, and in doing so, introduce various new technologies and specialty applications. So, um, uh, a payload that has enhanced visible zooming, so you could read a car license plate from way far away, something law enforcement wants, something that search and rescue public safety folks really want to be able to zoom in from far, far away, not
Mhm.
have to fly up to everything. Um, the usual array of lights and low light capable payloads are in the works as well, but also firmware. One of my big goals for 2024 with firmware is to give Cyrus a really mature mission planning capability, something that you would more expect to see from DJI. Theirs is very good, and we're not there yet, but we're working on being able to match what they do. Super important for inspectors, like for solar assets. We do have people using Cyrus now for solar farm inspection. I think the biggest one that's been done is about 400 megawatts, but it's a little burdensome. So we want to make that all just very behind the scenes, easy, push a button and the thing's going to go kind of experience.
So when you look at like DJI, for instance, a lot of their platforms allow collaboration with things like Drone Deploy or Pix4D or something like that. Are you guys looking at developing those capabilities totally in-house, or also making it that it has, you know, the interface that you could partner with other platforms or softwares already out there?
Yeah, API with existing platforms is the route that we're going, and Pix4D is at the top of the list. We get requests for their compatibility with their software all the time, and that's when I talk about the firmware ecosystem. That's part of what I'm talking about. There's no shortage of third-party software companies out there that want to work with Cyrus. But because we don't connect to the internet for security reasons, you know, we can't, we have to create custom interfaces. So there's a lot more work to make that happen. So it's really a matter of starting with the platforms that get asked or requested the most and work with them. So that's all happening right now.
Any idea on timelines for that? Like when you think, you know, Pix4D, for instance?
I wouldn't want to say, because then someone will hold me to it. We're working on it.
Fair enough. So just on the capabilities of the drone, could you just speak a little bit to, you know, how it performs, you know, especially like in, you know, different environments? You're talking about law enforcement, you know, in Florida and the heat and the swamp, and, you know, how is it as far as like IP ratings, you know, what kind of winds can it fly and that sort of thing?
Yeah, it's pretty robust. It's IP54. We've flown it in the rain. We really designed it to fly in a little bit of rain. I've flown it in a lot of rain, to be honest with you. We get a little hesitant about how do you advertise that, you know, how much water is too much water. Our safety manuals explicitly say don't fly in bad weather. But when we designed this, we really put an emphasis on having a bit of weather. That came at the expense of heat. You know, we could have made it a much more ventilated aircraft, such that the rather than flying at 105, maybe you could fly up to 110 or 115. But what would have the trade-off there would have been you can't fly in any rain at all. So this has a wind resistance of 22 miles an hour, so it'll hold its position against a 22-mile-an-hour wind. Most of the other drones that Cyrus competes against are about half of that for wind resistance. So you can get it out there in a little bit of weather, a little bit of rain. Obviously, you got to be very, very careful. We've worked with folks in the Midwest that are inspecting the big wind turbines, and they have to do that on a regular schedule. They can't say, well, you know, we'll wait for a nice spring day. They have thousands of these things out there, and they get inspected on a schedule, and it's like, all right, well, it's February, like Iowa right now. What is it, minus 16?
Right,
You know,
right.
they don't get to say we're skipping it today. So they can have wind, a little bit of snow, a little bit of rain, and they find Cyrus to be quite functional relative to, say, a Mavic or an Autel. And they like the price relative to a Matrice. So it has its place in those spots. We do got to get better on the temperature. 105 is the absolute maximum temperature you can fly Cyrus at. And the trickiness here is you can go fly 110-degree day. And, oh, that was fine. You can do it again the next day. But if you do that all the time, your batteries are going to wear out really, really fast.
Right.
So we're working on how do we make these things more robust, because it's just, you know, with global warming, it's not getting any cooler.
Yeah. Well, and especially I think there's a lot of environments where those temperatures are becoming, like I live in the Mojave Desert. And so, you know, there's months of the year where you're above 105.
Yep.
You know, we have a lot of solar farms here, you know, so there's a lot of applications for a drone like Cyrus. And I could see where, you know, with that increased temperature range, you could certainly use it for, you know, mapping and inspecting out solar farms and, you know, the wind turbines that we have out here and whatnot.
Yeah, I used to work for First Solar, so
Oh,
I,
okay.
I probably built some of the plants near you.
Yeah.
Yeah, you'd like to run a solar inspection when it's you get good contrast, but you also have to have the plant operating. You know, you can't go inspect at night when juice is not flowing. So it's a really narrow window if it's going to be a super hot day where juice is flowing, you can see troubled cells or troubled connections. But you can't let it get to 3 in the afternoon when it's 120. So yeah, there's definite trade-offs there for the technology.
Right, for sure. So with that kind of capability that it has, you know, great capabilities within the environment, you know, wind resistance and, you know, a decent temperature range and all that. What do you have a time frame for how long you think you're going to get to those points where you have like greater temperature range or, you know, increased ability to operate in more austere environments?
It'll be over the course of the next year. Um, for dealing with temperature issues. I mean, right now it's really a lot of education. Uh, all the rules, if you will, for when you can fly Cyrus are well stated in our various publications and videos. Some of our distributors have done videos as well, like the great guys at Florida Drone Supply really have the most comprehensive set of videos on Cyrus. If you're interested in learning more about Cyrus, just go to YouTube, put in Cyrus Florida Drone Supply. I think they have 12 or 13, 14 videos. So they get into all the details. We just need to keep emphasizing with our pilots that, you know, there are limits to when you can fly this thing. And then as we make things better, we'll educate them on what more room you have. We're probably not going to have a drone that you can fly in the Mojave Desert at 3 in the afternoon in the summertime. You know,
Right.
we'll probably tell those folks, you know, it might be good to do your inspections, annual inspections in February, March. When it's plenty sunny, you'll see plenty of defects if they're there on the solar panels. You just can't use it everywhere all the time. It's
I,
really, you know, it's an ongoing product development, just like any other drone company. If you
right.
look at where DJI was 5 years ago, Skydio was 3 years ago. I mean, the products they make today are very different from what they made years ago.
Mhm.
And the same is going to be with Cyrus. It's a product that is maturing every month, and folks they buy it for the thermal camera, they buy it for the cybersecurity, they buy it for the price. I think we provide great customer service. So if there is some sort of issue with it, we take care of the issue and take care of them. It's a matter of do you want to be an early adopter or not? Right now, the price is great. You know, with inflation being what it is, I'm constantly fighting that battle to keep the price under $10,000, and it's tough, but it's what we're committed to. So
Yeah, one of the things on a quick side note, you listed, you know, a lot of the things that people like about the drone. One of the things I appreciated from the demo unit I had is the user manual. You know, you never get a manual with drones nowadays. It's kind of like the way PCs became back in the day, where, you know, at one point you had a manual, and then yeah, and then the next thing you had was good luck, you know, and
yeah,
then you had to buy separate books and stuff. But your manual is very well put together, and you know, it walks you through every single possible thing you know, you could go through. So I really appreciated the effort that was put into that part of the complete system as well.
yeah, and we're updating it all the time. This is not ours. This is from a competitor.
Right.
This is what you get. Little thin thing. Most of it is languages that you don't speak. Yeah, you're kind of on your own. So as we collect experiences, we try and talk in our videos and promotions about cool applications that people are doing. But as people have issues, have run into trouble, you know, we had an incident a while ago where a law enforcement group was under a freeway overpass to get out of the sun. It was hot. And they were flying around And they just got very within 20 feet of the structure, and the metal in this massive concrete structure, I-beams and rebar, messed a little bit with the compass calibration of the drone. And so they lost control. They were able to fly away from the structure and regain control. So that's great.
Yeah.
But yeah, we just did a manual update, trying to emphasize and make it louder. There are appropriate and not appropriate places to fly a drone, all of them, including Cyrus. So if you're inspecting something, getting up close to something that's made out of metal, there's a protocol for doing that. Just don't fly up to it. And use the zoom cameras, stay back 50 feet. You don't have to get up so close,
Right.
et cetera, et cetera. So yes, we try and make the manual an education document. It's a little complicated. It's 80 pages, but I think there's a good table of contents there so people can navigate it really easily.
Yeah, I appreciate the length. I thought it was perfect. It definitely, any questions I had, as I was testing the drone out, it was real easy to just get to where I needed to and walk through the steps. So definitely appreciate your team's efforts on putting that together. Because like you said, the little pamphlet you get with most drones nowadays is pretty lacking. And, unless you have experience with the platform or somebody who has a lot of drone experience that they could kind of work through the normal workflow process of starting it, flying it, troubleshooting, and so forth, it can be a bit daunting for somebody who's brand new to the industry. And that manual really helps to eliminate that, I felt.
Good. A lot of work went into it.
Yeah, it was evident. Yeah, for sure. So what would you say overall, if you want to share, like a few closing thoughts with our audience about the drone and the future for it and everything, what would you like to share with the Altitude University community?
Well, I think try Cyrus, right? Don't buy it blind. Don't buy any drone blind. We have a network of distributors who are at events all the time. We have the Law Enforcement Drone Association, LEDA, that we're sponsors of. I think we're doing 8 events with them this year. So Cyrus will be at those events and many others, FlowCon down in Florida. Fly the thing. You'll see how easy it is to fly. You'll see the great imagery from it. You'll hear the story about how your data is secure. Generally speaking, when people get their hands on it, they want one, particularly people that have flown other drones and have a data set of how how Cyrus is better and different. So seek it out. Florida Drone Supply, DSLR Pros are 2 of our bigger distributors. Lone Star Drones down in Texas. Reach out to them. If you have a big enough need, they'll come to you, or you can attend one of the events. We can get demo assets to you, but just get your hands on it. I have every confidence that once you fly it, you're going to want one. And once you have one, you're going to want 10 and then 30. I mean, that's kind of the pattern that we've seen with the police departments, fire departments. And I think once we have the more mature mission planning, we're going to start pushing this into utilities in even bigger numbers.
Yeah, well, we definitely like to have one in our fleet. So we second that recommendation of you after testing it ourselves. Well, thanks again, Kelly. We really appreciate your time and all the information you've given us. And we hope you have a fantastic day. Thanks again.
You too. No problem. Let's do it again sometime.
Will do.